probably violating my contract even talking about this. I, as a joke, publish a blank book called Reasons to Vote for Democrats, a comprehensive guide. It was all blank pages. It becomes the #1 best-selling book nationwide on all of Amazon. I get an offer for a publishing deal, and Jeremy here was very helpful. He says, sorry, you can't take it. At what point can I take this deal? He says, 6 figures. Jeremy was right. And then they give me a show at the Daily Wire. So I might be the only guy in the history of political media to get a show for not writing a book.
Best-selling author Michael Knowles is one of the most polarizing voices in conservative media. From viral debates to college campus showdowns, he's mastered turning controversy into conversation.
60% of today's college students say the American dream is realistic. 74% say it's harder for their generation to achieve happiness compared to previous generations.
I agree.
You agree with the 74% say it's harder?
Oh, yes.
Why?
An illiterate peasant in the Middle Ages was smarter than most Harvard graduates today.
I disagree with you and with the 74%. In 2012, you graduated at Yale.
That's true.
That's correct so far. Great. Majored in history and Italian literature.
I did.
Fascinating combo.
Very useful combination
I was going to say, we won't get down that rabbit hole, but you pursued acting and did some plays, some films, and TV shows.
This sounds like opposition research. Yale,
I
show
know,
business.
it's
This
not.
is all negative.
You're very safe here.
Okay, all right. Hold on.
But this is just to set the context because this is a guy who, I mean, you've got some intellectual oomph, all right? I'm giving you that with Yale.
Thank you.
I personally couldn't get in there unless I bought a ticket. But then you go the acting route.
Yeah.
And what I want to get to is, what is the transition from acting to Daily Wire? Fascinating.
Very simple transition. Acting to politics is easy. You
Well,
know,
some might say they're the same thing.
Exactly. I would
Ronald
be
Reagan
among
did
them.
it quite well.
Yes. So I went to college at Yale, which is known for acting and for politics, you know, in terms of what it produces. Obviously, it's a liberal arts school, so I studied totally, by necessity, totally useless things. But I actually defend liberal arts education in that the purpose of it, when it's done well, most universities don't do it well anymore, but a handful still do. It's to cultivate, you know, your freedom, to help you make sense of your freedom. That's why they call it the liberal arts. So you study great works of literature and philosophy and history. Again, that doesn't actually happen anywhere these days, but that's what's supposed to happen. Right. And that helps you to, you know, become more human, you know, to exercise your mind and, you know, become acculturated in your civilization and to suppress your base passions and to become a free person. So that's the idea. I love that in theory. And history and Italian literature even had it kind of had a lead-in to my career, in as much as one of my theses was on Machiavelli. And Machiavelli, most people think of him as a political philosopher. He wrote The Prince and books on Livy and other works. But he also was a playwright and a translator. And so my thesis was creating the first English translation for the stage of his play, The Girl from Andros. And I thought, well, this combines two of my interests, show business and politics. And I had trained as an actor previously before college at the Stella Adler Studio in New York. I trained after college at Win Hanman Studio, which is a very long-standing, 50, 60-year-old studio. This guy was 92 when I trained with him. And my day job, most actors' day job, is to work in restaurants and things. Mine was to run political campaigns. So I had a little political shop in the Hudson Valley. We were running campaigns from the local to the national level. And I loved both of them. I make it out to L.A., and I booked a movie. It was a low-budget movie, but I was a lead in the movie. And there was this very odd thing that happened, which is I'm there, and I'm kind of like the dog that caught the car. I'm on the movie set, playing a lead, a small movie, but it was still a movie. And I was thinking about my political work. And I thought, maybe this is pointing me in a certain direction. Daily Wire starts about this time. And I didn't call them back initially about taking the job because I said, well, I didn't move to L.A. to have a real job. No one does.
Well, so pause there. So when you say you didn't call them back, what do you mean you didn't call them back? Did they reach out to you?
Yes, they reached out to me. But you got to remember, at this time, the Daily Wire was just getting started. Sure. No one knew what it was. I was pals with the guys who started it.
Okay.
I directed my friend Spencer Clavin in operas in college. His father, Drew Clavin, was one of the talent to start it. One of the first dinners I had in L.A. was at Drew's house with Ben, who was somewhat known at the time, but not terribly well known.
So they essentially say, think about coming and joining us and being a personality, an on-air.
No, they invited me in. At that time, Ben's show had launched, maybe Drew's show had launched. It might have still just been the Ben Shapiro show. But Jeremy Boring, who was the founder of DW and was a showbiz guy himself, he called and said, hey, can you help us start our social media department? Because in politics, I'd worked in social media, communications broadly. And so I said, I don't know. It's a real job. He said, you idiot, let me give you health insurance. What's wrong with you?
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, I'll do it. It'll be a fun gig until this thing goes under. And fun to work with my friends, whatever. Takes off like a rocket ship. And on the evening of the 2016 election, I was wrapping principal photography on a feature film. And then I was heading to Daily Wire to do coverage, to go on camera. And they were bringing me on the shows a little bit. And I thought, wow, this is odd timing, providential timing, you might call it. And I also noticed I was very popular on the set of the movie until it's election night, 2016. The results start coming in. I'm not reacting. But that was my problem. I wasn't. Everyone else is pulling their hair out. I'm cool about it. And all of a sudden, eyebrows start to go up. It says, this man, could he possibly be
a
Trump voter? Is it? Yeah.
Right.
And I had noticed this also as an actor earlier. My liberal acting friends, some of whom were pretty famous, they'd invite me to the Democrat fundraiser and to this and that. I said, we're headed for a conflict here, And then this was finally the end of it for me. I'd already had the sense that, well, maybe I really actually would prefer to do politics. But Trump wins, and I, as a joke, publish a blank book called Reasons to Vote for Democrats, a comprehensive guide. It was all blank pages. And this thing, it was self-published. Yeah. It was just to irritate my Democrat friends and relatives. It becomes the #1 best-selling book nationwide on all of Amazon.
Yeah, I remember this. How many units do you know to date?
A bazillion units.
It is really sold quite.
Yeah.
All right, so this is, I'm glad you brought this up because from a creative standpoint, we have a lot of professionals watching and listening. Did you bandy that about with people, or was it just in your head and you went, this will be funny and let me put it out there? Because there's a difference between going, this is funny, and it was funny and very creative, to actually going through the steps, even though it's not crazy difficult. There's some gumption involved with actually publishing this thing. And I'm just curious, because I think there's a lesson to be learned here in the instinct to actually do it.
You do have to do it, because the thing about it, and it's kind of ironic coming from me, from a conservative, is it is a work of modern art. In the sense it's not a real book, it's a simulacrum of a book.
Right.
But the thing about modern art, if you are ever misfortunate enough to be at a modern art museum, you look at the thing on the wall and you say, well, I could do that. And the answer always is, yeah, but you didn't. And that guy did. Right. So the guy who, taped a toilet seat to the wall is going to make $1 million. And you could have, but you didn't. And so there is follow-through. By the way, it wasn't the first blank book. There's another one I later came to learn called Everything Men Know About Women.
Right.
That was a good one. The Wit and Wisdom of the German People. Apologies to the Germans in the room.
We have a couple in the room, careful.
So there are a bunch of these things, but it hit at the right time. It was mostly me sitting on my computer. My wife, actually, then fiancé, I just gotten engaged, and I was sitting there, clicking the enter button on the computer a million times, and she said, why are you wasting your time on this stupid joke? Like, let's go to the beach or whatever. Right. 2 weeks later, that stupid joke could pay for our wedding like 5 times over. And but I was sitting there doing it. However, I did talk to Jeremy Boring about it, one of the founders of Daily Wire. I mentioned it to him. He said, it's pretty funny. He said, but you need a bibliography. I think I'm getting this right. I think the bibliography was his idea. Happily, I haven't paid him 1 penny in royalties, but I think, because that really helped it. In other words, you had to totally straight face it. And so there was an epigraph at the beginning of it, which is, this is not an essay to win the applause of the moment, but a contribution for all time, which is a quote from Thucydides in his History of the Peloponnesian War. And, I was thinking of having a cheeky quote on there. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything, from my mother or something. I said, no, you got to really straight face it. It's got to look like a book. It's got to have an extensive bibliography. You got to really straight face it. So I go on. It hits toward the top of the chart. Fox News asks to have me on, and we do the whole little bit. How long did it take you to write? You know, ha, ha, ha. And I said, well, it took me my whole life to research it, but 10 seconds to write it. You know, it's kind of an easy skit. And it jumps up to number 1. I get an offer for a publishing deal from Simon & Schuster. And Jeremy here was very helpful because I'm a kid. I'm in my 20s. They offered me, I'm probably violating my contract even talking about this. They offered me, call it $25,000. And I said, this is great. You know, right. I tell Ben Shapiro, I said, can you get me your agent? You know, he said, yeah, I'll loan you my agent so you can. And I tell Jeremy, he says, sorry, you can't take it. I said, what do you mean I can't take $25,000? I'm about to get married. I'm a kid. This is great. He said, no, it's not funny enough. He said, it's got to be it's got to be funny. It has to be audacious. Tell the agent you're not going to take the deal. At this point, I have another major publisher offering me. There's a bidding war over nothing.
Right, yeah.
And so I said, hey, Frank, man, you can't take the deal. He says, what? This is easy money. I said, sorry. Well, Jeremy was right. They start bidding the thing up. I said, at what point can I take this deal? He says, 6 figures. You can take it for nothing. I was okay. It's going up and up. You know. And finally, they hit 6 figures. So I said, take the deal. Sign it right now. You know?
Right.
But Simon & Schuster said, as part of the deal, I'm not allowed to do what I'm doing right now on your show, which is I'm not allowed to make fun of them for giving me a bunch of money for nothing. They could have just done the book themselves, so I'm not allowed to make fun of them, which meant they didn't get the joke. And sure enough, the book starts falling down the charts. This is a little providential, too. They call, they say, hey, we need to get the book up again. We just paid all this money and it's not selling anymore. I said, right, because you killed it. I said, I don't know, get me on Fox again. Maybe that'll help. They get me on Fox again. But we've already done that skit. We've already done how long to take to research. So we just started talking about Trump's Syria policy. And I mentioned that Trump had done a good job. Well, the audience member that mattered most was watching from 1600 Pennsylvania. He endorses the book on Twitter, a great book for your reading enjoyment by Michael Knowles. Jumps back to the top of the charts. International news. There's now a translation in Hungarian, as a matter of fact. Miart it szavazunk a libernyakokra. Available at all Hungarian bookshops that are worthwhile. And it jumps up again. And then the punchline of it is, they give me a show at the Daily Wire. So I might be the only guy in the history of political media to get a show for not writing a book.
Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, the creative lesson here. Did you doubt at any point whether or not it was worth just putting it out on Amazon, self-publishing? Or were you just bullish about it?
No, I was bullish about it because it was easy.
Right.
So had it required a lot of money or effort, I might have thought twice. But it was easy. It did require a little amount of work from me.
Yeah.
But and the fear that some people would have is that it would fail. And this is something that I see really prevents people from getting where they want to go, is they're afraid of failing and looking foolish. And I've failed it. I have failed at so many things. I have failed at more things than most people try to do.
I love it.
And I had a family member say to me, it seemed flattering, say, Michael, you're one of the most successful people I know. I said, oh, that's very sweet. I said, but actually, I have failed. I'm like one of the biggest failures, too, like sometimes in spectacular ways. But what would it have mattered? So I put this joke out. It flops. Some people make fun of me. Whatever. Okay, I'll move on.
How much do you think learning how to hear no when you were acting? Because
this is the key.
I think maybe you had the muscle for it, yeah?
Because I joke and I say, please don't bring up my derelict past as an actor, And I actually do have sort of moral questions, actually, even about the ethics of the acting profession that I've come to as I read more into philosophy. But I don't really regret it, is the thing. And it's why I have a lot of respect for actors. It takes a lot of guts to just fling yourself off a building and hope that you're going to catch on to the one, parasail that's coming through. The odds of success are so low, and the amount of no that you have to hear. And when a salesman hears no, it can mean that Either he's doing a bad job or it can mean the product is no good. When an actor hears no, he's the product. So the rejection is deeply personal, and it builds up a very thick skin, which is extremely helpful in politics.
Yeah.
I don't really regret it, but it can be, this is true no matter your profession, whatever you're in, you're going to probably experience a lot of failure in the beginning. And if it doesn't totally dispirit you and break you down, I think people in a lot of professions draw on that experience of failure to help propel them afterward.
There is no success without failure. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. There are a lot of things that can contribute to stress in the workplace, from heavy workload and a lack of recognition to bad work-life balance or even a toxic environment. But most of us can't skip work and hit the beach every time we get overwhelmed. So we need to have small steps that we can take to manage work stress. Like for me, it's hitting the weights multiple times a week, walks, pickleball, something to physically change my environment. And I don't want us to forget therapy. Therapy can also help us navigate whatever challenges the workday or any day can bring. So if you're thinking about trying therapy, I want you to contact BetterHelp. BetterHelp is 100% online, which means it's affordable and convenient. To get started, just fill out a short online survey and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. And with more than 1.7 million client reviews, BetterHelp has an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars. So manage your workday challenges with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Ken to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Ken. Okay, Michael, you have been quoted as saying that your role now is really political show business.
Yeah.
And dovetailing off of what you just said, as a communicator, communication is many times called a soft skill in the corporate world.
Is it a skill? Does it even count as a skill?
I think it is. And I actually think it is the currency for real influence, whether you're in leadership or not.
Yeah.
Whether you're a parent,
Yeah.
you're a spouse, a politician, a leader, and in your case, you have an opinion show.
Yeah.
And it is entertaining. You can see that you've got that, in your past and that. My question is, what have you learned from acting, or what did you learn rather, from your acting days that have made you a better communicator in your current role? And what can we take away from it?
Well, at a very basic level, it teaches you how to speak to different audiences. And I was once with a foreign diplomat. We were having dinner. And he said, Michael, I'm going to explain to you the difference between a flatterer and a diplomat. A flatterer lies. A flatterer just lies. And flattery is a sin, actually. And to be flattered is very bad because it kind of poisons your soul a little bit. But to be a diplomat is not to lie. It's merely to focus on the good things. So you're telling the truth. You're just focusing on a partial aspect of the truth. And acting teaches you to do that because you inhabit different characters. It teaches you to have empathy or sympathy at the very least for different characters. At a broader level, this is where people who are, even if you're not an actor or something, if you're in a liberal environment, that's a great thing because it means you necessarily have to consider the other point of view. Especially if you're a conservative student at a liberal university, you are having rhetorical bullets fly at you all day long. And either you can abandon your position, and some positions you probably will abandon, or you will get much stronger in your views, political, cultural, religious, philosophical, whatever, because you'll have heard every argument, you'll know how to answer them. And acting is good for that. Acting really allows you to put yourself in someone else's shoe. If you play a role, if you're playing the bad guy in a movie, I've played plenty of bad guys, but you can't think of him as the bad guy. You got to think, no one thinks of himself as the bad guy. You got to think of yourself as the good guy. And so you understand other people's perspectives. It allows you to answer their objections better, and it allows you to avoid just creating straw men in your arguments.
Few things, Michael, drive blood pressure rates up like political discussion. They can ruin Thanksgiving dinner, as we all know. One of the things I'm fascinated by, and quite frankly, I admire you, as I've seen some footage. You're on these college campuses where you stand up and it's one-on-one. We've all seen that, I'm sure. You've been on shows where you're surrounded by opposition and they are literally playing hot potato to get in the seat to take you on.
Destroy my career.
Yeah. And the thing I want to talk about, because I think it's so applicable to many of us, is grace under fire. When it gets personal, because I know there's got to be times where you're going, careful,
Reaching at
careful.
the ring of their little necks.
Yes. What's going on there? That's a two-part question. Is that something you've learned? And if it is something you've learned, what can we learn from you? Is it your personality? And then I guess the second part of that is, how do you, in those moments where you feel triggered, not become triggered?
There's a touch of personality in there. I'm
Pretty even-keeled guy?
a pretty even-keeled disposition, but got a little bit of that Southern Italian blood, Sicilian, a little bit of that Irish temper. So I don't think you could attribute most of that to personality. I was an atheist for 10 years, ages 13 to 23 just about, and I had a pretty strong reversion. It was I wasn't quite on the road to Damascus, but it was pretty close. And so it was an intense period of intellectual formation and moral formation, ongoing, and spiritual experience, and that helps. So the chief answer is grace. You have to really pray for grace, and then you can cultivate the virtues. And an important virtue to cultivate is patience. This goes hand in hand with some stagecraft discipline, because it's just a fact that whoever loses his temper loses the debate. And it's very popular now to yell at people in debates, and it makes good TV, I guess, but it makes the person look foolish. So you don't want to be in that position. A very famous debate between William F. Buckley Jr. and Gore Vidal at the 68 DNC. They're sitting in chairs like this, and Gore Vidal the whole time had been calling Buckley a Nazi. And it finally got under Bill Buckley's skin. And he's sitting there. I'll clean up the language for a family program, but he says, you stop calling me a Nazi or I'll punch you in your face and you'll stay plastered, you queer. He called him a queer to his face. And he really lost it, and he lost the debate because of it. Even though Buckley was right on the points, he lost it. So you don't want to do that. And also to recognize, there but for the grace of God go you. When I did that show you alluded to, the Jubilee show, where it's me surrounded by all these LGBT LMNOP people, I think, okay, some of them are transvestites, they think they're the opposite sex. Some of them have these disordered sexual desires. Some of them have all these. So they have these problems that I cannot in particular identify with. I haven't had to deal with that particular struggle. However, I've had to deal with plenty of struggles. And I've had plenty of bad ideas. They have this bad idea that marriage doesn't really exist, or that, a man and a woman are effectively the same, or what, they have all these bad, but I've had plenty of bad ideas too. And I think, well, there but for the grace of God go I. So what's the right thing to do? Is the right thing to do to just totally crush them into the pavement? Or is the right thing to do to say, hey, you're a human being. I have a respect for you as a human being. I have a love for you as my neighbor. And let me help show you the truth. Because you mentioned earlier about having convictions, I could be frequently wrong, but I'm almost never in doubt. I do have fairly firmly held views, and so if I feel confident in my views, why would I need to raise my voice? Why would I have to call someone a mean name? Why would I have to get in their face? If they're throwing these arguments at me, I can swat the arguments away, and then I can say, hey, buddy, all right, so those arguments don't work. Let me give you a better option. And if I can do that, worst case scenario, I win over the audience. Best case scenario, I win over that person.
Camera stopped rolling. Was there any civility post?
Oh, yes. Yes, there was. In fact, at least one member of that panel has emailed me. But yes, very civil. Then they went on camera again afterward, and we had these post-show wrap-ups. And I said, Michael, what did you think of it? I said, I thought it was great. Nice guys. And, I got a little heated, but whatever. And then they interview the other guys. They say, that man is the worst Nazi I've ever met in my whole life. It was the worst experience ever, But there were some civil moments for sure. Did I persuade anyone in the room? Probably not. For one or two guys, I think I planted a seed that could flower. The rest, I don't know. But I finally made it through War and Peace. I picked it up at least a couple times.
Tough read.
Tough read, never quite made it. I recently made it through. And there's a great scene where the protagonist, Pierre, and Prince Andre, another character, they're arguing. Because Pierre he was previously rambunctious, and then he oddly became a Freemason. That was his introduction to spiritual thought. And Prince Andre used to be happier, and then he got kind of shell-shocked in battle, and he decided he was just going to live for himself and be a total derelict and not care about anyone else. And they have this debate. And Pierre says, no, you have to care about people and the serfs and the poor, and that you need to live for other people and be a humanitarian. And Prince Andre says, no, I don't, stupid. I'm just going to eat, drink, and be merry and forget about everyone else. After their debate, Prince Andre was clearly persuaded, though he would never have told Pierre in the moment. And so he starts to do all the things Pierre suggested. And Pierre, for all of his bluster, didn't actually go and finish any of the projects that he said he was going to set out to do. The debate worked and did change the opponent. They would never admit it in the moment. And so that's fine. I don't care if they admit it to me in the moment.
Yeah.
If in some of these debates, someone comes up to you 5 years later and says, you know that thing you said to me? It actually changed my life for the better. Hopefully not for the worse. Then that's all I need to hear. Because people have done that for me. And I'd argue till I'm red in the face in the moment. And then I realize, oh, darn, they're right. I was totally wrong. And it would change my life for the better.
I'll tell you what changed my life for the better. It was getting Delete Me. My buddy George was telling me about all of our stuff that's out there, and it freaked me out. Here's a fact for you. Your personal data is everywhere on the internet. And I don't just mean your name. I'm talking stuff you don't want out there, like your home address, phone number, names of your kids, and more. That's all thanks to data broker sites that sell your data. And then it ends up in the hands of online thieves who use it in scams and phishing attacks. And the worst part is, even if you think you've cleaned up your digital footprint, your personal info can pop back up without warning. And that's why I got Delete Me and why I'm proud to recommend Delete Me to you. They're the industry leader at scrubbing your info from hundreds of data broker sites, and not just once, but continuously. Then they send detailed reports showing what they've removed and from where. And if you have a unique situation, they've got specialists ready to help you. Look, this isn't about being paranoid. It's about being prepared, being safe. So don't wait for a phishing scam to catch you off guard. Go to joindeleteme.com/frontrowseat today for 20% off an annual plan. That comes out to just $9 a month. That's joindeleteme.com/frontrowseat. All right, we've got another question back here.
Yeah. So, Michael, I'm curious to see, to hear how you transition from Michael Knowles, political debater extraordinaire, to husband, father, family guy.
I can spell it out. You know, I first learned how one makes that transition in 7th grade health class, and it's not totally for
Great
a family
retention.
program. Yeah, I did. And we're 3 kids strong. We might keep it going. Yeah. We got married in 2018, so my career had really started to take off shortly before we got married, which was good. I'm glad that I got engaged. It really started to take off. You could feel, okay, we're a little more stable and then get married. And I expected that we would have a kid immediately. And we didn't. So, okay, I got to go back to health class, make sure, everything's checked out. But it took a while. And I think this is true for a lot of young people and increasingly middle-aged people today. They were all told the minute you look at a girl across the room, you're going to get her pregnant. And so this was a culture that encouraged contraception and waiting to get married and waiting to have kids. Now it turns out we have a crisis of fertility. We have a birth rate well below replacement, have since 1971. We have people delaying marriage to the point that they just, even if everything were working well, they probably would have trouble having a kid. And so we were shocked. We went to the fertility doctor. I think after a year, you can go to the fertility doctor. We went, and they try to sell you IVF. And I don't support IVF, being a mackerel-snapping papist myself and a conservative when it comes to bioethics. Though there are plenty of Protestant groups, actually, that oppose IVF now, too. But we weren't going to do it. That was a non-starter for us. Even though I had all that blank book money and it's an
Yes.
expensive procedure, we weren't going to do that. And it was terribly painful experience, certainly for my wife, and even for me, it was a bit tricky, because you think, okay, well, I always just expected that I'd have a kid or a lot of kids.
How long was the total time of infertility?
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
So look, I know people who've done it for 6, 7 years, but still 2 years.
That's our story.
Was it?
7 years.
7 years, yeah. I've heard
It's
this.
just crazy painful.
Yes.
In very different ways.
Yes, and in a way you really don't expect.
That's right.
And so we were, and it's all in God's providence, of course. But this coincided, this was right before COVID, and we decided, okay, well, if my wife was starting to take some shots or something, that started to help. And I said, okay, well, I'm traveling all the time to give speeches back then on college campuses. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to bring my wife with me. I'm going to buy the expensive airplane credit card. I'm going to take my wife with me. We're going to go to the lounges. We're going to make sure we do all the things the doctor says to do. And we don't have kids now, and that'll be easy. Okay. 5 seconds after I buy this expensive credit card, COVID happens. All my speeches get canceled, and my wife gets pregnant. So I said,
Somewhere Dave Ramsey's going,
it's like I should have listened to Dave. What was I thinking? And so it was a big shift. It also got me thinking, though, about the fertility crisis, because for a lot of people who do not have a kind of firm objection to parts of the fertility industry, I thought they would have been led in by their emotion and by dubious doctors to spending maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars on a process that they haven't thought much about, that is very painful, very invasive, often not very successful. And we were able to get out of it with a week full of shots. Wish we'd done the shots 2 years earlier. But it was in retrospect, a great way to enter into parenthood, because it really makes you grateful for your kid.
yes, it does.
A lot of people are neglect their kids or regret, getting pregnant, at least initially. For us, we were over the moon, and whatever the shot was, it worked. Because then, while my wife was nursing, I was told that a woman can't conceive while she's nursing. Turns out that's not true. Because then our second one came immediately.
Wow.
And then third one came shortly after that. And it reminds you that if you're in media, your kids are going to see all of this someday. I'm probably in thousands of hours of film. And I don't literally mean they'll see all of it. I mean, whatever I don't want them to see, that's the clip they're going to see. So I'd better behave or endeavor to behave in a respectable way where your kid's not going to be ashamed of you. That's the first one. And then the second one is you begin to soften in a way. You get harder in a way. You got to get a little bit tougher and clearer on your moral lines, but you soften in your pastoral approach, let's say. Because I'm a relatively young guy, but I realized when I go to these college campuses, the freshmen, I have little kids, 4 years and younger, 4, 2.5, and 10 months. The freshmen are closer in age to my son, to my kids, than they are to me.
Correct.
That was a big shift.
Yeah.
I was, all right, well, now I've got to start talking to these kids, not like a peer or a quasi-peer as it was when I first started. Now they're kind of like my kids. That's a big shift that people have, I think, in public life.
Yeah, I wonder if that makes you more empathetic. I'm glad we're
Or does it
here.
mean I'm just going to start beating them?
Right, exactly. I'm glad we're here. I want to ask you about the mental state around the American dream on today's college campuses, because you're out there.
Yeah.
And I understand that the crowds you're speaking to aren't not necessarily a full representation, but here's some data I want to hit you with. Pretty interesting stuff. UCLA just did a recent study. I knew you were going to do that. 60% of today's college students say the American dream is realistic.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more hopeful than I would have thought.
Yeah.
And achievable, but the same amount, 60%, said it would be difficult to achieve it themselves. So they think it's possible, same amount, but they don't think they can do it. Thought that was interesting. Another piece of
I
data.
think they're probably right, both of them.
Okay, hold the thought. 74% say it's harder for their generation to achieve happiness compared to previous generations.
I agree.
And 50% say social media has the biggest influence on how they view the American dream.
I agree. I agree with all of that. I agree with the UCLA kids. Who would have thought?
Why do you agree that 74%? You agree with the 74% say it's harder to achieve happiness?
Oh, yes.
Why?
Certainly. Because I'll go back to an Aristotelian definition of happiness. I've never heard a better one,
Okay.
which is that happiness is a rational activity done with excellence in accord with virtue. That's happiness. We think today that happiness is a feeling, which is why people, the moment they feel even moderately displeased, start popping pills to just move their hormones to make them
Right.
feel what they think to be an approximation of happiness, which it's not. But no, happiness is not an emotion. It's an activity. Activity is crucial to it.
The rational.
And it's rational activity. Yeah, it's not, there was a journalist, won't say who just leaked a video, it seems, of himself doing all sorts of really depraved, bizarre things that he paid to do. That's not rational. He thinks the kind of person who pays to engage in degrading and aberrant behaviors thinks that will make him happy. That's why he's paying the money to do it. But that's not rational activity, and that doesn't lead to true happiness. Right. So that's the rational activity part. Done with excellence means happiness requires some practice because you got to get good at it. Right. If your will is not properly conditioned, and if your intellect is not sufficiently developed, it's going to be hard for you to be happy. And in accordance with virtue, you got to do it in ways that are conducive to your flourishing. Right. Not in ways that are giving in to your base appetite, which will counteract your reason.
I agree with that. I mean, the Greeks, I don't want to say it incorrectly, the word, so I won't, because it's been a while since I've read it.
Eudaimonia.
Thank you.
That's the one.
I wanted to say it right. Of course, you just instantly pulled it out. It's like talking to a human encyclopedia.
That's great.
By the way, encyclopedia for you youngsters is what Wikipedia is now. But it was about the pursuit.
Yeah.
Happiness was the pursuit of virtue.
Yeah.
So with that definition, and I agree with you, that's why I disagree with you and with the 74%. They can't achieve that. They absolutely can't.
No, they're just less likely to because they're. I would bet you something like 90% of those kids don't know what virtue is.
So you think it's harder because of the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
The whole point of education was to cultivate your intellect to some degree and your will so that you're tending toward virtue. Our education today denies that virtue exists, first of all, denies that reason exists increasingly, that there is objective reality, and discourages excellence because they pass out participation trophies. I mean, that's a kind of tired and cliche description of it, but certainly that's the case. I mean, Harvard University just instituted a remedial math course because they got rid of the SAT, so they're admitting kids who couldn't pass 7th grade algebra. That is lunatic, right? I mean, that shows you in what low esteem we now hold excellence. So that's what it's not that the kids are different. It's not even that there's something in the water.
I got you. You do believe it's possible. You just don't think it's probable.
I think it's harder for them. I think it's harder for them. It's harder because sometimes the stodgy conservative, this is where I break with my stodgy conservative friends, though I am both stodgy and conservative. but I break with them a little because they say these, entitled rats, they just need to buck up and pull themselves up by their bootstraps and stop whining. But I think, they've got iPhones and they've got more money and they've got cars. Yeah, they've got all these material things, but they're ignorant when it comes to what really matters. They've been raised likely without religion, the most important thing in life. They've been raised ignorant of what a human being really is, what human nature really is. Their education has tended to entice them to bad behaviors that will harm them and mocked and derided the behaviors that are good for them. And they don't even learn basic facts anymore. So they don't even know that the Battle of Lepanto was in 1571. Just like facts. I remember even when I was in history class 15, 20 years ago, we were told, and I had some good history teachers, but the broader movement of history was, you don't need to learn facts and dates and men and battles. No, you just need to learn the broad trends and patterns. But you can't learn trends and patterns unless you know the facts. That's what constitutes the trends and patterns. Right. The reason the ideologues wanted to get rid of basic facts is because it allows them to paint whatever narrative they want and call it the broad trend. But all of that to say, these kids are so poor. I mean, they're more poorly educated than anyone ever. We flatter ourselves. We say that we're so much smarter than not only classical antiquity, but the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, whatever. I think, an illiterate peasant in the Middle Ages was smarter and better educated than most Harvard graduates today. That's going to make it harder for them to have a happy life.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very interesting. I'm a little bit more hopeful than that. But it does come down to numbers. Well, I don't disagree. Once you clarified it, I now am in agreement with you in the sense of how it is harder because of the cultural context that they're in. Yeah. However, it does come down to a numbers game. If in fact what you said is correct. So in other words, if you were to look at and we don't have this kind of data, but if you were to go, okay, this is how many American homes where kids are being raised properly. As you laid out the litany.
If you start to fix those problems.
If we take your checklist.
Yeah. Oh, then it could be 100%. Yeah. Happiness is open to all of us.
That's right.
But it's not an individual matter. This is another great insight of Aristotle and of the classical conservative tradition, that the modern ideology of liberalism, which many conservatives are liberals in a lot of ways, gets wrong, which is that we are a social creature. The left takes this to mean that we all need to be communists and, the workers of the world need to unite. No, that's bad. But likewise, we're not atomized individuals floating in the ether.
Correct.
We're social creatures. So if you live in a community that does not recognize the common good, that does not have safe streets, does not have good schools, does not practice virtue, that has all sorts of degeneracy everywhere, then it's going to be very hard for you to be educated in the proper way, to have a happy life. Your happy life is dependent on other people. At the very least, it's dependent on God and your relationship with God. Your relationship with God is mediated through the institution of the church, which God gives to us, Christ gives to us in his sojourn on earth, where two or more are gathered. That number is important because it means it's a communal endeavor, and we're part of the mystical body of Christ. So other people are involved in this. And if all the other people are scattered and have perverse minds and wills, it's going to be tough for you, man, and you would have been better off living in a materially impoverished but spiritually edifying and enriched culture as might have existed 100 or 200 years ago.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I wonder, we got stuck in the data, and I'm glad we talked about it, but as you're on college campuses, this is broad brush.
Yeah.
So not a completely fair question, but lots of grace for you to just do it your way.
Yeah.
Oh, in a word or two, how would you describe the mental state of today's college kid about their success? And I'm using success in broad general description.
It's improving. I've been doing this long enough. It's weird. I know it's very unconservative to have any optimistic statements,
Right.
But it is improving. It's different than it was when I started speaking on campuses 7 or 8 years ago.
Contrast it for us, then versus now.
The kids are smarter now than they were 7, 8 years ago. They're better informed than they were 7 or 8 years ago. Now, this is damning with faint praise to some degree, because 7 or 8 years ago, things were kind of at a low point. I think they're more thoughtful now. I think they're a little bit better behaved now. You get less of the screeching and the screaming. The Palestine war has kicked that off a little bit. You do get the kefias and the rabble and the violence, but it's compared to the widespread insanity that was on campuses 7, 8 years ago, it's relatively contained, and the schools are taking some steps to stop it. Otherwise, the kids it's kind of like a spell has broken. And I tie that into the political story. The New York Times, which I hate to quote, had a story out a week ago. 1,433 counties in the United States are triple trend for Republicans. In other words, they have moved to the right consistently in each of the last 3 elections. Now, Trump won 16, Biden, we were told, won 2020, and Trump won 2024. Nevertheless, these are counties that even in the 2020 election moved to the right. 1,433, that's about half the counties in the country. 57 counties are triple trend Democrat. So we're talking about longer than just one election, longer than just one candidate. Data points here. Half the country is clearly moving to the right. Barely any of the country is moving to the left. It is as if a spell has broken. You can't do that with just, we're talking counties that cut across all demographics.
Yeah, that's a fascinating piece of data, which, by the way, I've not heard anywhere.
It's amazing. I mean, I hate to give the New York Times credit, but they did the work on pulling that out. What does that mean? That is reflected at the lower level. That is reflected with young people, because young people have moved more to the right than many groups, which means that they're no longer locked in this, kind of stupid stalemate that we had been in for some years. They're now considering new questions. They seem to like the way the country is moving, in as much as you can in a country as fractured as ours. They're moving on. They've settled that basic stuff, and now they're thinking, okay, well then what does that mean for me? Not only my view of the political order, but what I should do in my career, what I could possibly do in my career and in my spiritual life. This is the key part to me, because I really hate the culture that we have of college kids just only thinking about money. You need to think about money. It's good to have enough money. It's good to pay your bills, and you need to get a job and all the rest of it. But your life is really not about that. And we had, certainly from the new atheists in the early 2000s up through almost the present, we had this intentional neglecting of the spiritual life. That period is over. The new atheism is deader than disco. And now we have kids who are taking very seriously spiritual matters. You're seeing a lot of conversions to Christianity, a disproportionate number of conversions to Catholicism, and to some degree Eastern Orthodoxy. You're seeing people take the ultimate questions much more seriously. And you want to talk about what's conducive to our happiness. I mean, ultimately, that is what will conduce to your happiness. We have natural happiness in this world, and it points toward a supernatural happiness, which is the only thing we can hope for, because we humans have this strange fact about ourselves, which is we're bodies in part, but we're also spirit, and so our intellect is an immaterial substance, and it points to immaterial realities. So if your aim is purely material, you're always going to be disappointed. Kids are talking about that now. They're thinking about that now. This, to me, is the most hopeful sign.
It really is. And to put a bow on that, there's no question that if you look at how the Greeks and many of the Stoics, some didn't believe in God, where they missed it.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that this is a journey on this earth. And if you believe in eternal life, then happiness can really be experienced as this journey towards the virtue to be as Christ-like as possible on the journey. And therein lies the issue where people don't get it.
Even this, I was wondering why the return not only to Christianity, which is a sacramental religion, but to an incarnational faith, at least.
A lot of orthodoxy. Young men are flocking
orthodoxy
to.
and orthodoxy lowercase o among the Protestant denominations, orthodoxy capital O with a move toward Eastern Orthodoxy, and Catholicism, probably the most prominent among them in these conversions. Why? And I think the answer is we have just been through a very intense Gnostic period where we were told the body means nothing. We were obviously told that by the transgender ideology when they said your body doesn't have anything to do with who you are, though incoherently, they would also then say your body matters so much you got to chop it up and do whatever. But they obviously have a bit of a screw loose. There was a Gnostic idea there. There's a Gnostic idea to the internet that my true self, doesn't need my body. I can be a virtual avatar of myself, or that there's somehow a disjunct between what I do, my moral behavior on the internet versus my moral behavior in real life. Life. But hold on, you're the same person.
There's been so much moral relativism.
Moral relativism and a denial of the importance of the body.
That's right.
And I think this is why the sacramental view of Christianity is on the rise again, is people, especially after COVID, where we weren't allowed to even touch each other or see each other or be in the same room as each other. People realize we're bodies. We're bodies. The body really matters. Tertullian, great early Christian writer, says, the flesh is the hinge of salvation. Christ is not just an idea floating in outer space. He's a person who is incarnate in a time and space in a political entity called the Roman Empire. And he really dies. And he really is resurrected, and he really broils fish on the beach for his friends when he's resurrected. So I think there's an attraction to the reality that we're not just ideas floating in outer space. We're real incarnate things. And any religion that's going to speak to us has to be incarnational.
What was the deciding factor to go from atheism to saying, okay, this God is in fact real?
Yeah. Christ is who he says he is.
Yeah.
It started, I was 13 when I apostatized at my confirmation. Kind of funny.
Yeah.
And
that was a rough day for your parents, huh?
My poor mother, she said, Michael, you're going through a phase, receive the sacrament. You'll come out of it. Don't worry.
She patted you on the head, essentially.
You dumb kid. And she was right.
All right.
As someone who works in an industry that's so polarizing and cutthroat, what advice would you give to someone who's aspiring to work in an industry that is solely built on your own personal brand in such a hard industry?
Well, I don't accept the premise. And I think really important advice is to get that premise out of your head. It's not solely built on your brand and yourself. I wouldn't have my show if not for the Daily Wire. That's right. So that means it's built on Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, Caleb Robinson, Andrew Klavan, especially Andrew Klavan. He was kind of my way in. It's built on all of these and all of the many people who are behind the scenes, whose names you probably haven't heard of. I would not have a show without that. I might be doing something else. It might be
This show doesn't happen today if Dave Ramsey doesn't give me the opportunity.
Certainly, exactly. So it's nothing in life is solely built on your personal brand. And the people who I see go wrong, whether that means their shows are unsuccessful or whether that means their shows are very successful but they're rotten on the inside, the people who have gone wrong in this industry and others think it's all about them, and it's really not. So forget about that. You need other people. The next thing people say out of that is, well, God, that means I got to go network, don't I? Let me go network. No one has ever gotten anything out of networking and network contact. It's so useless. And they buy these stupid business cards and they force you to take them and you immediately throw them out. And you will not get anything out of a contact. You might get something out of a friend. I would not recommend making a friendship to get something. That's not a good kind of friend. Aristotle keeps coming up in this show. Aristotle says there are three kinds of friends. Friends of convenience, where you both sort of like the same thing, like a friendship of pleasure, like you both play pinochle. Once the pinochle game's over, you go your separate ways. Friendship of utility, you're just kind of using each other to get ahead. And then friendship of the good, which is where you have this transcendent outside object that you're both fascinated with, and it grows your friendship of virtue. But all that to say, you can still work with your friends. That's how the Daily Wire was built. Daily Wire was built in a weird way because we were all at least somewhat friends, and some of us were very close friends. And it's been very successful, I think, in part because of that. So that's the first thing you should do. Then, when you get your own brand or whatever, your own business, then you need to know what you're about, and which is why people who want to get involved in show business or politics or political media, I say, don't get famous too young. Don't be successful too young, because you're not going to know what you think. And you're going to either imprison yourself in an ideology that's false and it's going to strangle you, or you're going to look kind of dumb when you get smarter and better read and you figure out what you think. So you need to know what you are down to the core, because what's going to happen is at a certain point you're going to see that when you say one thing, it's going to get a little more popularity. It's going to have more views than the other thing. And you're going to be very tempted to just go down that path. And you can, you want to give the audience what they want to some degree. But if you become a captive of your audience and you start saying things you don't really agree with because you're going to get more views, you've just mortgaged your integrity. You might as well not have a show because it's not really you. It's not the you want to be, at least. And so that's the point at which you really got to know what you're about, and you need to think deeply into who you are and realize, okay, the brand wasn't built by me, but it could die because of me.
You and I have some really unique commonality in the roles that we play. In that we're both public communicators, different lanes.
Devilishly handsome.
I wasn't going to say that, but I will receive it. But we are in the shadow of personalities. We work with personalities that are bigger than us.
Yeah.
Dave casts a massive shadow.
Yeah.
Certainly Ben does in your world.
Yeah.
And yet, we kind of do our own thing. And I want your perspective, because you're one of the few people that I could actually have a conversation about it. But I do think there's something that you can share with our audience in regards to being who you are uniquely. And you might be in the shadow of a large brand or whatever the application is. What you've learned about staying true to who Michael Knowles is and who he wants to be, and yet you're in the orb of something that's far bigger than you.
Well, I'll take it up even a higher level than that, which is certainly when the show started, Ben was like the dominant brand, maybe in conservatism, period. And basically no one had ever heard of me. And then obviously, the shows grow, you reach a kind of equilibrium. But Ben is, ridiculously famous all over the world. So there's a temptation if you're just starting out at a company to kind of just do an impression of that. Because you say, well, that worked. Maybe I'll just do an impression of that, which would be the worst idea. Because they already have that. What do you need? You already have Coca-Cola. What do you need the generic store brand for? So you have to offer something different. So with Ben, that was simple enough. He's a Jew. I'm a Catholic. He has been much more libertarian. I'm much more traditionally conservative. But we have different views on things. He didn't like Trump in 2016. I did like Trump. So then I'll take it up a level even higher, which is everyone in right-wing politics is in the shadow of Trump. Trump is the biggest star on earth. I don't care if you're Rush Limbaugh, God rest his soul, or Ben, or me, or, I don't know, Glenn Beck, Megyn, Tucker, or like anybody. We are all in the shadow of Trump, and there is an incentive to just be like Trump. And you've seen people kind of shift and do that. And and I'm a New Yorker, so I naturally actually do that a little bit. But you got to resist that urge, too. You have to resist the oddly tailored suit with the bright red tie, because that works for Trump. Trump is the man. He is sui generis.
You're one of the few people that's had the guts to point out his oddly tailored suit.
They're oddly tailored.
As a guy who actually cares too much about that, I've always noticed that. I thought, with all the money and resources this guy got, he can't get a suit that fits.
You know what, though?
And why tie the tie 5 inches too long?
It's all intentional. You
think so?
Yeah. I say it's oddly tailored because it would look ridiculous on me. Trump, it's all dialed. I've looked at it left. I think it's because the way he stands. It makes. I think some of it's slimming. I think the long tie makes him. It's all totally planned. But when you look at it individually, you say, it's totally crazy.
If we're being honest.
Yeah.
If we're talking to a true haberdasher, shall we say? I know you love a good word.
Seville Row.
I mean, it's a mess.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
why.
Right. But it's actually
felt very freeing to point this out.
No. That's a good symbol of the broader thing with Trump. Things work for Trump that don't work for other people.
Oh, completely true.
And things work for Ben Shapiro that would not work for me or for Matt Walsh. Or things work for Dave that would not work for you. So you have to even forget relative prominence, because people rise and they fall, and people who were a big deal 10 years ago are forgotten today, and that'll happen. And you might be 10 times more prominent tomorrow, or you might totally disappear. That could happen to anybody at any time. The only thing that's going to give your work any meaning and coherence is if you offer something that other people are not offering.
That's right.
And sometimes I was talking to a politician, very thoughtful man, and he said, who's had a great deal of prominence. He said, I might not be the man for this moment. So you don't want to push it. If it's not your moment, then just do your thing. And maybe that means you have a lower income or fewer views or whatever, but if you're speaking the truth in a way that is authentic to you, at least you might have a shot at it tomorrow. And if it's not, who cares? It's all in God's providence. You don't sweat that.
So my question to you all is, are you doing work that is authentically you? In other words, the work you're wired to do. That's why I created my Get Clear Career Assessment. After about 15 to 18 minutes, you're going to get a detailed report on your 3 wires. Your talent wire, that's what you're good at doing. Your passion wire, this is work you look forward to and get lost in. And then your mission wire, these are the results that motivate you, the results that you want to contribute to the world. And after that detailed report, you're going to have some self-awareness that maybe you've never had. And being clear on how you're wired is going to give you confidence to stay the path that you're on or to change course if necessary. It's a game changer. Check out the link in the show notes to get your Get Clear Career Assessment today. Well, folks, I always tell you about the value of a question. And when you're sitting in on these conversations, and I'm so grateful that you've been joining us, I want you to be taking away things. And so I'm always going to take the lead. So much that I learned from Michael today. But I wrote this down very early on in the conversation. We were talking about fear. And, in my previous show, I had the opportunity to coach over 10,000 professionals on the air who were dealing with some type of confidence issue. And I could trace it to fear. And I've talked about fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, and all the fears that lock us up and keep us from becoming who God intended us to be and drive us into doing things to escape. And when Michael talked about the holy fear, I thought that was so good. The awe and wonder is what he said. And so in the days ahead, I'm going to be listening in, looking at opportunities as things come my way, whether it be as a husband or a father, as a friend, a coworker. Whatever fear I'm dealing with, I want to make sure that I'm always channeling it to where do I see this holy fear, this awe and wonder, to listen to that, because I believe God made us to be creatures of wonder. That's why every little kid is hardwired to ask 400,000 questions in a day. They're not trying to be irritating. They're trying to get to the bottom of something, and they have this childlike wonder. Let's listen into that in the days ahead. That's my challenge to you. Hey, if you enjoyed the conversation today, make sure to let us know by liking and subscribing. And also, if you'd like to join us in the future here in studio for a live recording, you can check out the link in the show notes for up-to-date info on guests, dates, and opportunities. Well, I know I'm better for this conversation. I know you all as well. As my friends here that joined us today, would you join me in thanking Michael for this? Thank you, buddy.
Thank you very much.